Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers of this channel. My name is Sean, and today we got to talk about what is going on in the city of New York, because right now, as we speak, members of the New York City Council are debating an idea about removing statues of our founding fathers, and if they don't remove them, they want to put trigger warnings on these statues that tell you that these are horrible, evil, white racist people. And make no mistake about it, it has nothing to do with our founding fathers being evil, white racist, or anything of the sort, and it has everything to do with them founding the United States of America, because these people are fundamentally anti-American and they're seeking to rip down our cultural history, rip down our nation's heritage in order to replace it with their woke nonsense. And we're going to get into this. I'm going to explain all this. But before I get into it, I want to say thank you to everybody who signed up over at actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay.
And thank you to the podcast listeners, Spotify, Apple, and Google's podcasting platform.
The purpose of today was to really catalog all the different bills that we have currently that have something to do with reconciliation, equity, repairing the harms that have been done to Black people in the city and indigenous people.
So this is Natasha Williams. She is a city councilwoman from Queens, New York, representing that area. And let us be clear, Natasha Williams will never do anything remotely close to in her life that is actually equivalent to the figures that she wants to tear down. Now, this is one of the reasons why she puts in equity as a part of the reason why she wants to rip down the statues of our founding fathers, because to her, it's uncomfortable that the people that she's trying to get rid of are figures like Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States, the person who argued for and pushed for the Bill of Rights in our United States Constitution. And that is just inequitable when you think about all the people who weren't white people like Thomas Jefferson who didn't do that, and thus they don't have statues, and that's just not fair, and the product of evil white racism. And make no mistake about it, they're also going after Christopher Columbus statue, because Christopher Columbus also happens to be a white person, and you know, he discovered the entire Western Hemisphere, uniting two halves that were separated of the human tribe by the land bridge way back when, and changed the world in a way that no person will ever be able to duplicate, unless, of course, we find another colony of people on a foreign planet and unite the human tribe once again. So she's upset about that. She wants to push for an equity agenda because it's just not fair that those people achieved those things and she can't point to equivalent achievements in her own life, so she needs to tear them down after reading a couple chapters of a gender studies or racial studies kind of paper, and that's where she's at right now in her life. And she's got the problem glasses, everything about her that indicates exactly who she is.
The city's Cultural Affairs Committee held a hearing Tuesday at City Hall to discuss if monuments like the Christopher Columbus statue at Columbus Circle, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson statues at Washington Square Park, and Peter Stuyvesant figure at Stuyvesant Square should be removed from city streets due to their controversial past.
There's nothing controversial about any of these figures' past, except for the fact that they existed in the past, they weren't Black lesbian females, and they didn't have the woke policies of today. That's what they're angry about. These people all existed in a time period where slavery was prominent around the world. What makes them unique, what makes them recognizable historical figures, has nothing to do with the fact that some of them own slaves, yet this woman, again, is uncomfortable by the fact that these men achieved, these men were trailblazers, so she wants to rip them down because she's pretending that it makes indigenous and Black New Yorkers uncomfortable. If you are made uncomfortable by the fact that the founding fathers are the people that they are, then just go out of this country. Just become an expat, go to your utopian communist loser nation, and go be happy over there. But this is the United States of America. Taking the George Washington statue out of Washington Square Park is an absolutely absurd notion. Removing Columbus's statue from Columbus Circle is also absurd as well. So get over it, get a life, move on with your life. You're not going to be able to tear down our history. We're not interested in your cultural revolution. We are proud of the history of the United States of America, and we're not going to be shamed by a mediocre city councilwoman.
Or stay up with explanation.
Not just what we like to celebrate them for, but what other things did they do to harm certain people?
The bill would require the city to remove works of art on city property that depict a person who owned enslaved enslaved people directly benefited economically from slavery or participated in systemic crimes against indigenous people and humanity.
So this is stupid in every possible way. They want to remove all statues of anybody who owned slaves or benefited economically from slavery, which is such a vague and idiotic notion that it could apply theoretically to anybody in the United States of America, because we had slavery at one period of time in this nation, and then people had children and then continued throughout the history of this nation. So these kind of people argue that every single American benefits from slavery, except for Black Americans, even though, again, if you descend from Black slaves directly, and you're living in the United States of America, your economic status, your income, your wealth is significantly higher than those of your ancestors that stayed back in Africa, so it would actually be more true of Black Americans, but they don't want to have that conversation. What they want to do is just say, oh my God, the freaking white people, evil white racists, let's talk about equity. Wow, isn't the indigenous people, aren't they suffering because we have statues to people who achieved great things in the United States of America?
The bill also suggests that the statues aren't removed, an explanatory plaque next to the work of art would be needed.
We have to acknowledge that there are historical figures that contributed to our city and state, but we also have to acknowledge that they did harm to our communities.
No, this is nonsense. You're being ridiculous. You're an insane person. And no, your community does not expand beyond the confines of linear time. I'm sorry, but if you think Thomas Jefferson did something way back in the past that harms you to this day, you're insane, you're ridiculous, you're absurd. It would be one thing if you were actually somebody who was a slave, who was owned by Thomas Jefferson back in the day, then you could argue that Thomas Jefferson did harm to those people. But the idea that 200 plus years later, when you're living with the rights and privileges afforded to you by the Bill of Rights that Thomas Jefferson fought for, this was one of the great arguments between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, it's just absurd in every possible way. Come off of it. Again, another mediocre person, New York State representative from Nassau County, ought to be ashamed of herself, trying to present herself as more important than she actually is. And to be clear, this mediocre person will never do anything in her entire life that reaches 1/10 of the greatness of the achievements of any of the people whose statues she's trying to rip down.
Back in 2021, the 7-foot Thomas Jefferson statue that sat inside City Hall for 187 years was removed due to America's third president's history as a slave owner.
The Jefferson statue was removed under Bill de Blasio's orders during the Black Lives Matter riots, where they were destroying the city in the name of George Floyd. And by the way, these are the same exact people, to show you that they have no consistent moral standards, that say anything in George Floyd's past completely off limits. Don't talk about it. If he pointed a gun at a pregnant woman's stomach, who cares? Because George Floyd is the saint of all saints. So they can whitewash the history of George Floyd when it's convenient, but when you actually look at a founding father whose achievements in their totality are beyond a net good for this nation, no, we don't want to talk about that. Oh, he owned slaves in a time where slavery was common, and that's not even a notable fact about him. Let's get rid of his statue. Let's erase it after 187 years, because we're too woke to appreciate Thomas Jefferson in the United States of America. We have all these mediocre people complaining about him, saying, well, actually, I decided that this thing that Thomas Jefferson did was bad, therefore, evil white racism, therefore, St. George Floyd has commanded me to remove his statue. No, absolutely not. Shut your face. You're absolute garbage. You're net negative to this country. You hate this country. Your goal is to destroy this country. And we should not give credence to your arguments. We should not foster your hatred for the United States of America. And we should not foster your hatred for white people, period. Again, this is all connected on their side of the aisle. All of their beliefs, the anti-white, the anti-male, the anti-merit, the anti-American, all of that comes together with them trying to rip down these statues. And I know a lot of people are going to say that the evil orange man Donald Trump was correct when he said that this was the next step after they took down the Confederate monuments. But to be clear, by the time that the evil orange man already said that, They were already doing this to the founding fathers. They were already doing this to other American historical figures that had nothing to do with the Confederacy. This is who they've always been, so it wasn't a prediction, it was a post-diction. And yes, if you don't stop them now, they will continue to do this into the future.
We understand the history and legacy of this country. So how many are we going to take down?
How many are we going to take down? None. We should take down none. We should keep our statues up. We should appreciate our founding fathers for who they were, what they did for this country, and you should stop begging for welfare because you guys all know that this is going to come to a welfare conversation. Just wait for it.
The New York City Council is also considering a freedom trail and reparations task force.
My only concern is that we do it correct. And the correct way to do that is to have the community of eligibility completely and thoroughly defined.
Look, I'm not sorry to say this, but if you're in favor of reparations, you're pathetic. Reparations should be a non-starter in the United States of America. The idea that you are entitled to rob the taxpayer based on you thinking that by the melanin content in your skin, your ancestors may have suffered at some point in history is absurd in every possible way. You have every opportunity to earn and make yourself into a success in the United States of America. You are not entitled to be propped up just because you feel like the ultimate victim. All of these task force are absurd. All of these task force are a waste of money on their own. And no, nobody is deserving of reparations unless, of course, they experience direct harm and they would get reparations for that direct harm. These people have not experienced it. They're privileged people in positions of power in the city of New York pretending to be victims professionally in order to get sympathy and hoping for a welfare check down the line. You're not entitled to welfare. Get over yourself. Get over the fact that our founding fathers were great people who happen to be white. Move on with your lives. Make something of your lives, because you're not entitled to your welfare checks.
Many New Yorkers say it's important to tell the whole story without erasing, canceling, or rewriting America's history.
You need to contextualize it.
You need to contextualize it. Is there nobody on the correct side in this entire segment? Is there nobody standing up for American history? Is there nobody ready to point out that if you were to contextualize any of these historical figures, they are by far and away a net positive, not just for this country, but for the world? No, you're just going to say we want it to be fair for everyone. Absolutely ridiculous and absurd, because what they defined as fairness is equity, which means equal outcome. So if your ancestors, like my ancestors, by the way, didn't found the United States of America, you deserve to be recognized for that non-achievement in your historical bloodline. Absolutely ridiculous and absurd. If I were to go up to you and say, well, there's not enough Irish Puerto Rican founding fathers, we need to tear down the statues in the name of equity, nobody would buy into that argument. So the idea that we're going to hear this argument from woke race hustlers that have infiltrated New York City and New York State government, or found these nonprofit organizations where they demand welfare from the taxpayers of New York City and New York State, is an asinine proposition.
And city leaders say they will continue to work with the mayor and New Yorkers to make sure their next steps are fair for everyone.
So yeah, every statue should stay up, and instead of listening and having these conversations with these kind of race hustlers, what we should do is point in their face, laugh at them, and point out, as I did throughout the course of this video, that no person in this video featured trying to crap on the legacy of Columbus, Stuyvesant, George Washington, or Thomas Jefferson will ever in their lives be as notable, be as memorable, be as historically significant as any of those people. But hey, those are just my thoughts. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like the video, show me by leaving a like. Subscribe for more content. Follow me on all my social media. Support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the importance of defending our founding fathers. Till next time.